There are different races, different species, different dimensional beings who are present and observing, and some of them are very impatient. Some of them understand the impact that this transition, this development has on their own species, and they want to connect with you. They want to commerce with you because, again, humans are exceptionally creative, and some of these species don't have the creativity that you have. You may not have all of the technological knowledge that some of these species do, but you think about approaching things in a unique way.
But some people may be listening to this saying, I am not creative at all. My creativity is blocked.
It means you're spending too much time in your head. You're spending too much time in the ego because creativity comes from the heart. So there's a judgment that what you have to create is not good enough. You cannot use the ego mind and the heart at the same time. If you are feeling particularly stuck, take a step in any direction. The universe will give you feedback.
Wendy Kennedy, welcome back on Just Tap In. Just to start off, I wanted to ask you what frequency that humanity is now beginning to tune into are you most excited about right now?
Oh, there's so much energy that we're tapping into. We're doing a lot of integration right now, but also with that comes our ability to be far more creative and to really start standing in our power and deciding what it is we want to create, what frequencies we want to generate. And I think that's what I'm excited to see, the inspiration, the new ways of thinking that people develop. Because, like I said, there's a lot of integration and it can be very challenging sometimes, and we get sucked into a lot of the heaviness that's around us. But it's important to remember that we have the power to shift our energy, and it's not very difficult. It just takes a little bit of focus and some decisions in how we want to feel, what we want to see reflected back to us in the world. So I think that's it.
How do you feel that the energy of inspiration is closely related to our spirit?
Well, I think we're always creating 100% of the time. And I know some people don't like to hear that we're creating 100% of our reality. We're co-creating it. The ego doesn't like that sometimes because, the ego doesn't want to experience anything that is negative or challenging. But the soul says, that's the interesting stuff. Let's explore that because we learn from that. We learn about the opposite when we have contrast. So sometimes we'll go and we'll do those hard things so we can better understand the lighter things. And, in terms of inspiration, it's letting go of those old forms, the old ways of being, and just being present and seeing what we're moved to do in the moment. And I think life gets a lot easier when we do that. And, there's just so much mental conditioning that we've been through that we're having to kind of rewrite some of our belief systems and rewrite our way of thinking and being. And that to me is exciting.
When I found out that we were both in Egypt around the same time, almost the exact same dates, we overlapped 2 different journeys there. I was in awe. I don't know why I felt so much love, especially just connection with the other groups that are beginning to go down there and do these activations. I know you were telling me before that the last time you were in Egypt was 25 years ago. And I know that while you were there 25 years ago, you performed a ritual where you left some crystals and records there at that time. And this journey was an opportunity for you to open up those records again and see them with new eyes. I'm really wondering what it was like to come back to that land and open records that, maybe you had forgotten or were needed to see and emerge in a new way.
Yeah, I went with a group of about 40 people, and there were 4 of us leading the group. And so for me in that role, I think it was a slightly different experience, just kind of monitoring everybody and seeing what everybody's needs were. So for my journey, it was a lot more subtle than maybe somebody who could wholly immerse themselves in that as we went to all the different spaces. And when I was there 25 years ago, like you were saying, I felt called to go because I have memories of after Atlantis fell, of going to Egypt and encoding crystals with information and leaving them there in a multidimensional space underneath the Sphinx. And so when I went 25 years ago, it felt important to me to go and to be in that space. And it's interesting how it's changed. I look back at some pictures. I was just recently doing that of me there 25 years ago, and there was nobody on the Giza Plateau. It was kind of an odd time, I think, there. It was kind of rare even then not to see a lot of people, but it was very special to be able to have that opportunity. And I didn't go to a lot of the other temples that I went to this time. And so it was new for me, and I didn't know what to expect, really. I didn't know what I was walking into. And there were a few places that I went that, for me, I had some more memories and some more things that opened up. For me specifically, it's a lot of integration from Atlantis, because that's probably my most potent lifetime, the one that impacts this life the most in terms of records and information that I'm trying to access and things that I'm trying to integrate from that lifetime. And I tried to go in without any expectations, especially when we got to the Giza Plateau with the Sphinx. We had some private time there, and then we had private time inside the Great Pyramid. And interestingly enough, those were not my most powerful experiences. There were some other places, such as in Abydos, and that I have memories of being there 150,000 years ago and creating a temple of light there. And there are some remnants of that in the architecture in the temple that you can see there. And there are shafts of light that come through. And in this temple of light, the way that the light shone through, the angles that it came in at, they were healing frequencies. So depending on what you needed, you would go stand in certain shafts of light to receive healing. And so there were little bits and pieces that I received along the way. And while I was there, I was hearing guardians of the temple. They're like, well, you've been carrying this Atlantean stuff around for 12,000 years. You ready to let go of the guilt? You're ready to finally put it down. So I felt like I was able to do that while I was there. And, we all want to have that really big experience, and sometimes it's just way more subtle. And that's something I want to make sure people are aware of as they're meditating and they're doing their spiritual work. Sometimes we want that big flashing light moment, and it doesn't happen. Life tends to be way more subtle. And it wasn't until I got home and I was speaking with someone that I went on the trip with, and I was telling her about memories that I had of being in Atlantis, and I had some judgment around something, and I had no idea where it came from because I didn't have that energy present in my life, not in that way. And she just made one comment about, it may be connected with this person. And it was like a whole chapter of Atlantis opened up for me in that moment. And I've had access to those records for probably 28 years, and I hadn't seen this aspect of it. So sometimes things come in time when we're ready to look at it, when it's appropriate, and not always in the most dramatic way. Sometimes it's way more subtle. Mm-hmm. And you were saying the same thing to me, that it was more of a subtle journey for you as well. Yes?
Yeah. In Egypt, I really learned how to soften my body, especially like going into entering these sacred sites and not being so much in my, I have a very like curious George mind, which is why I do this podcast, but I was able to reach a point where I could quiet down that aspect of my mind, which is a gift. I see it as a strength. I see it as something that I can leverage in many ways with the work that I do. But it wasn't the energy that I needed going into these temples. I needed to be very quiet, empty. Literally some days I wouldn't eat before going into any of these places because I wanted to be completely just empty of anything. And in that emptiness, I found softness in my body. So I also didn't go in and have these huge Kundalini awakenings where I was speaking light language. I was really training myself to feel. And as a man, I feel like that's a big part of our work as well, is to reconnect with the feminine aspect of ourselves. And with feelings comes emotions. I see those two as different, but also very linked. So I wanted to ask you, why do you feel that so much guilt and grief has been carried out from our lifetimes in Atlantis? Like, what actually happened there for us to be able, or for us to be carrying these emotions now in this lifetime, and why we're here to reconcile them?
Well, I definitely think there's a lot of just grief in general, because you had a whole civilization collapse, gone in an instant. And everything that you knew, people that you loved, is just gone. All the knowledge and all the wisdom, for the most part, had been wiped away. And what we carried with us was all that was left. And so we went out in 12 different directions, 12 different groups, to take that knowledge and wisdom, knowing that there would be a time on the planet when we would need it again, that we were coming into kind of a darker cycle, the darker end of the cycle. And so now, as we're moving back into the light, we're accessing those records again. And, for some of us, we didn't have the lightest lifetimes. There was some manipulation of energy in an attempt. It may have been in our minds at the time that we were trying to achieve something that was more positive, but the way we went about it was a little corrupted. And so I think there's then guilt that comes with that as well. I know that's certainly true for myself as I access some of those memories. So there are lots of levels and layers to it. I definitely think that the energies of Atlantis are something that we are walking through again. It's the same patterns, the same programs, the same frequencies, and we're trying to integrate it. And I think that's why so many people have memories of being there. A lot of people will have memories of Lemuria, but I think we kind of have to walk through some of that Atlantean stuff first, clearing out what is more recent in our history before we can get to Lemuria. So I think we're seeing more and more people right now having memories of that civilization as well.
You were telling me about this lifetime 150,000 years ago, and even that time frame stretches way back to what we initially believe. They tell us that the pyramids were built 11,000 years ago. What was it like to remember being around at that time on Earth? And, maybe were there other civilizations, species living amongst, the human population at that time?
Yeah, and that's also where the Osirian is. And to me, that's kind of a special place. It was what I saw there on the land were 12 energy centers coming and merging into that temple of light. And it was also a portal for different species to come in, to kind of transport in, if you will. And so it was a place of exchange of ideas and energies. And it was far more interdimensional at that time. We had memories of being higher in nature, and we connected with our stellar family, with our galactic family in a much stronger way then.
Yeah, I heard you say that the ancient cultures remembered their true divine nature. And I'm really curious then, how did that play out in their day to day? If we were to remember our true nature, I feel like the world would be different. But how would they play that out, knowing that information and that truth that they are divine itself?
Well, I think, the guides describe this as being a game of descension and reascension. So at the beginning, in those older civilizations, we had that stronger connection. And as time passed, we lost it. And now we're coming back around to see if we can remember. And, that's when we get into Lemuria, which is one of the far oldest civilizations. I think it's actually probably the oldest in terms of the beings who decided to play this game. A lot of Lyrans came to Earth to help with this, and they began the Lemurian civilization. So I think on a day-to-day basis, people were a lot more conscious of what they were creating, the way that they lived in harmony with each other and with the planet and with nature. And, that's kind of slowly eroded away. We can see bits of that in some of the more native cultures, the Aboriginal cultures across the planet, where they're living more in harmony. They still have some of their lower trappings, shall we say, but I think it was just a different way of being, a different way of thinking, where we weren't worried about resources in the same way, that we shared our joy, we shared the things that we were passionate about, and we were aware that our needs would be met from ways that we couldn't imagine in the moment. We didn't struggle to try to control that. We didn't try to manipulate other people to think the way that we thought in order to be supported. We just acknowledged other people exactly where they were, and that was fine. We didn't have to have everybody on the same page, so to speak. And, I think that's one of the lessons that we're learning right now on this planet. There's so much judgment that's going on around people having different ideas, and we want people on the same page so that we feel safe, so that we feel secure. And we're learning that that safety, that security, it comes from within us. It is not something that is necessarily outside of us. And as we learn to hold that resonance, we'll shape and form the world around us, what we perceive. And, if something is being manifest collectively that isn't in alignment with the frequency that we're holding, we're going to put ourselves in a different situation for that experience. We won't necessarily align with it. Or if we do, we're meant to be a beacon of light, to hold that calm, that peace in the midst of chaos, to be a way shower for those that are around us who may be struggling in the grips of fear and worry and doubt.
Do you feel that it's possible to hold different perspectives without judgment?
Hopefully. I think that's what we're moving towards. I think that's what the collective is learning to do right now. That, and I see that within myself. It's been 30 years since I started working with the guides, and I can notice judgment in myself, and I will take a moment to go, you know what, it's okay. Where is that judgment coming from? What thought of lack, limitation, or separation am I holding on to that's creating that judgment? And what can I heal within myself? What do I need to address within myself so I don't feel like that person holding another judgment or another way of being is necessarily going to negatively impact me? That I'm the creator and generator of my reality by the frequencies that I hold. I can't control anything outside of myself. All I can control is the energy that I hold in this moment. So if I keep coming back to that, then I'm not disrupted and disturbed by everybody else's energy in the same way.
And
I'm not...
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, and I'm not 100% successful with that. Some days are easier than others, and but I think at this point I'm conscious of it faster, and I'm quicker to make those adjustments than I was in previous years.
Yeah, and I think it's the P's that have said, the Pleiadian Collective, that we can either perceive reality from our heart or from our ego mind. And I don't think it's one or the other. I feel that it is both. And when we are more in that ego mind, then we will have these, preconceived notions about the world that then creates judgment, separation. And then when we drop back into our heart, then we can work through that and neutralize it. So I'm curious then, as we were just talking about Egypt, were the P's excited that you got the chance to go back to Egypt this time around? And, what are their thoughts about having groups like us go and go to these sites and sort of have these remembrances from other lifetimes as well?
They're always excited by anything I do. I think they're just curious to see what I
Biggest
create.
cheerleaders.
Yeah. So whether I'm staying at home and connecting with that or going out, they're excited for the adventure. And I think that's important for people who can't necessarily travel. They don't have the opportunity to do that. You can energetically connect with the different places in the land, the sacred places in the land. And that's kind of a funny term to me, thinking of one space as being sacred, because to me, the entire planet is sacred. And I've never really understood that fully, why people will have such reverence for one location and not for the entire planet. So why is a temple sacred but not your home or, the land next to you? So, or the land that you're standing on. But they're always excited by everything that I do.
That's one of the things that I learned in Egypt, is that we can create sacred space anywhere that we go. And, even just prior to this, starting to record this conversation, we did a short meditation where we brought that energy of Egypt, we brought that energy of these activations here to the present moment. And that's what we're doing when we're transmitting, and everything is frequency. So that's why I began by asking you what frequencies you were excited about that humanity was moving through. What about the ones that we're most ready to let go of right now?
Fear, worry, blame. I think those are big ones that are coming up for people's safety, security. It doesn't really matter what your political beliefs are. I'm not really interested in that. What I'm interested in is how you're responding to the world around you, what's getting triggered and activated. And when you can start to recognize that, then you can really start to tap into your power, because you have an awareness of maybe some of the subconscious thoughts that you've been holding that aren't serving your highest expression of light. And I think a lot of people have given away their power at the moment, to governments and things that are going on in the world. Instead of deciding how they want to feel in the moment, they're in a reactive stance. And I think that's what we have the opportunity really to perfect, to master, is our ability to determine the frequencies we want to hold. And then as that gets pulsed out, that gets reflected back as our reality, as opposed to reacting and then having an emotional response based on what's happening outside of us. That's backwards. But that's how we've been conditioned to respond. Always, it is first and foremost an internal job. They may be subconscious programs that are vibrating out that are being reflected back to you. But it's always starting first with the frequencies that we're holding. And, as we're going here, as we're getting higher and higher in frequency, we're also seeing some of the lower stuff. It just is a way for that to come to light, for that to be seen. So I don't necessarily see this as being a quote unquote negative thing. I think it's an opportunity for cleanup.
And why do you feel that the P's teachings right now are so focused around empowerment?
I think it's very easy to get caught up in predictions and what other people are saying. I think there's a very well-known channel who recently came out with some statements that spun everybody out. They were really worried about what was coming down the line. And I heard a lot of stuff. And it's not the only person. There are a lot of predictions out there, and people get very, very worried about that. And that's what I mean. They've given over their power to something outside of themselves. And the guides are pretty cautious. It's pretty rare that they will give a prediction. And they do this with intention, because if they say something's going to come to pass, then we start putting our energy into that and we start to manifest it. So maybe it had a 2 or 3% chance of coming to pass when they made that quote unquote prediction. But as we start to focus on it and put our energy into it because they said that, then it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So that's why I think it's so important that you just decide how you want to feel. You decide the frequencies you want to emanate, and then that starts to kind of build, and you see that reflected back to you. This is how we make change. It's not by fighting an old system. The old system is broken. And so you're just putting your energy into what you don't like, and what you don't, what you judge, you're going to get more of. That's also why sometimes people don't see what they want manifest, is because they're still holding judgment. They might say, oh, I want this beautiful thing over here. That's fabulous. But the reason they want it is to avoid having a negative experience. They're still judging the negative. The universe wants to bring us into wholeness, into balance. And so we will create that negative reflection so that we can see that that judgment is still there. And that's why people are like, well, why in the world, I'm focused on this positive thing, but I'm still getting the negative. It's because the belief is still sitting there. So it's about letting go of that judgment and knowing that that negative thing is an expression of source energy. Everything is source energy, both positive and negative. And when you can accept it as being a valid exploration of frequency, then you bring yourself back into wholeness with the universe. It doesn't mean that you want to condone it. It doesn't mean that you want to lend your energy to it. It just means that it's a valid exploration of frequency, and it provides contrast for the positive, just as the positive creates contrast for the negative. And I think that's where we're headed. That's what we're trying to learn to see, but people can get caught up in all of the fear aspect, and they're not choosing the frequencies that they want.
And that's the piece of empowerment, is the ability to choose. So going a little bit deeper into, the prediction side, because I know that's a big thing in this space right now, where a lot of people are looking for conversations and content around prediction. And let's use an example of, let's say someone says that if we make this choice, there will be a very negative outcome, a war, whatever it looks like. And then on the other choice, we'll be in unicorn land. How then do we use our own self-empowerment to not focus our attention on the outcome that we don't want happening? Because the fear will bring us to, oh no, like that's going to happen, and then we create more of a possibility of that happening. What does the flip side look like, where we can really choose the experiences that we want to create?
So I would say start with what you recognize is getting activated. Like, oh my gosh, I'm worried. Now I'm stressed out. Well, why are you stressed out? Why are you worried? Well, I'm not safe. Well, if you have that awareness, then you know that you need to work with feeling the frequencies of being safe. What would it feel like to feel safe in my body? And it's pretty rare in terms of the people that I work with. I would say probably 98% of the people are not in an area where they are in like a war-torn zone. They're not experiencing something that is life-threatening. It's more of an internal story that is happening for them. So it's having that awareness and working with that energy, working with the polar opposite then. And as you start to continue and focus on, I'm safe, what would it feel like to be safe? And allowing yourself to immerse yourself in that energy, you start pulling that energy from the negative belief and you start feeding it into the positive. And that's what starts to go out, and that's what you also see reflected back to you. You'll see more instances where you do feel safe. Maybe you feel emotionally safe. You have a great conversation with someone where you might not have felt emotionally safe 3 months ago. You would have shied away from sharing your feelings with someone. Or it could be that you feel physically safe. Maybe you don't like going out in the evenings. You don't feel physically safe. And now when you carry that sense of safety, you have an awareness and you trust that if there's something you need to be aware of in the moment, that will make itself known, and you will make adjustments in what you're doing in order to stay in the flow of that energy. And the other piece that's also important here is for you to recognize, what fear or worry is coming up, and give yourself permission to feel it. Because as you just observe it without any sort of judgment, you allow that energy to continue on its journey to flow through. What we tend to do when we feel something that is unpleasant is to stuff it down. I don't want to feel it, and the energy stops flowing. So if you can just notice where that energy sits in your body. What's happening with the body? Is it hot? Is it cold? Is it tingly? Is it numb? Do you feel expanded, contracted? Is there any pain in the body? Just observe that. And then what emotion is surfacing? Is it frustration, which is different than anger, which is different than annoyance? So you can give it a label. And then what's happening with the mind? Is it active? If it's active, what's the quality of thought? Is it positive? Is it negative? Is the mind still? And just observe again without judgment. When you don't judge it, it can continue its journey. And what will happen is that any other time that you have stuffed down that specific frequency throughout your life, or even in a past life where it hasn't been integrated, it's stored in your energetic field. When you give yourself permission to simply feel that energy, it can continue on its journey. It will allow all that other stuff to come up and out with it. So it's not just what you're experiencing in the moment, it's every other instance where you suppress that energy that can then flow with it. So it's quite powerful to give yourself permission just to simply feel. The guides say the longest that we can really hold on to that energy is about 45 seconds as we're just observing it. And if we are holding on to it longer, then we are probably getting lost in the original story of the past, what happened, or we're trying to project into the future and figure out how we can avoid experiencing it again. So if you can just stay present with the observation, it's kind of like mist where you just can't grab onto that feeling anymore. It just kind of slides on out. And you might have to do it several times if it's something that's strong that you've held on to for a long time, but you'll go through it in levels and layers, and each level or layer is only going to take about 45 seconds.
I used to judge my sister a lot because she's a very emotional being. Sometimes she would come home, lock herself in her room, and just let out her emotion. And I used to be like she's not in control of her emotions. Like, what is that? Like, I was just judging it. And then I realized she's such a master because she's allowing herself to feel it and really feel it. Like, I'm not saying like kind of feel it. It's you go all in, take a pillow, and allow all of those things to move through your body so that you can then release them. And then an hour later, I see her cooking in the kitchen and I'm like, she's good. Like, she's okay. It's like that, like in the wild, the animals that shake off, the fear and then they're back to normal. Obviously within a contained, safe space, we can do that. And in that way, empower ourselves even more. So, Wendy, I would love to open the space if the P's want to come through today for a few messages and questions. If that's something that you feel called to do, we'll open a sacred container for that.
Yes, so always. So I always like to let people know if this is the first time watching or connecting with me. I actually work with a lot of different beings from different star systems, but the Pleiadians take point whenever I work with the public. They are a group of about 2,500 beings of light. They don't have physical form, and they work with tone and sound, which is why their dialect is different than my own. It's really not any one particular dialect. It's just open vowels where they can modulate the frequency. And in addition to getting the information, it's almost as if you're getting a healing today. So you just want to make sure you drink plenty of water over the next several days just to help move the energy through the body. All right, so we'll see where we go. Yes, hello, dears. This is the Ninth Dimensional Pleiadian Collective, and it is a pleasure and an honor to have the opportunity to once again connect with you. So, there's a lot going on your planet right now, and we're very excited to see what you create for yourselves. We know right now many of you may have some worries about the future. You're not certain what's to come, and to be honest, that's every moment. You never really know what's coming in the next moment. So truly, this period is no different than one that you went through a month ago, a year ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. It's always an unknown, the next moment. So as you can stay centered in your heart, it makes it easier for you in terms of having an awareness of whether the moment that you've stepped into is one that you want to continue in terms of the frequency that you're exploring, or if you want to make a course correction. And that's what allows you to flow with greater ease. That's what allows you to create more of what it is that you are seeking. And let us take a moment here to talk about manifestation and your role in it. Your role is to work with frequency. What you are moving into, this time frame, is one that you haven't seen on this planet, honestly, ever, because this is a unique time. You have some ancient civilizations that are somewhat close, but this is in and of itself unique. And you don't have the forms yet. So if you keep looking to the old box for the form, you're going to get more of the old. And this is why we have said for so long, work with frequency over form. There are so many who talk about the process of manifestation, and they're saying, well, focus on the form and what it looks like and get into the details. The problem with that is that, 10 years ago, that was fine because, what you were manifesting 10 years ago was pretty similar. But you're moving into something that's new. So you've got to work with frequency, and the universe will bring the form. The universe will orchestrate that. You are in co-creation with the universe. And so if you are focused on frequency and you are immersing yourself in that energy, you will recognize forms that contain that energy so that you can step out to engage with it. You'll say, oh, I've been asking for this thing, and that feels like it, although it looks nothing like what I thought it was going to look like, but I feel really drawn to it, so let's go explore that. And that's what we invite you to do right now, because you have an amazing spark of creation that exists within you, and it's rather unique throughout the universe, that you have such a strong, powerful connection. And that comes because Earth is a grand experiment. You've got thousands of worlds of genetic material and the emotional components that go along with it. So your creative spark is quite strong. Some civilizations don't have access to that level of creativity, but you do. And we're excited to see what comes of this. So if you can let go of the fear and the worry, and you can work with the process that Wendy just shared with you, and before the feet hit the ground in the morning, if you could just choose a frequency for the day, what do you want to focus on? Maybe for the day, it's peace, or maybe it's creative flow, or maybe it's compassion. Set an intention for your day. You'll find that you are far less in a reactive posture. You are not swayed so much by other people's emotions when you decide in the morning how you want to feel. And you set that intention and get that energy moving. And then as you go throughout the day, check in. Are you in resonance with that frequency that you are seeking to manifest? If not, come back to that feeling state. What would it feel like to feel peaceful? Or what would it feel like to feel compassionate? And, are you being compassionate with yourself? Are you being compassionate with others? When you go back to this heart-centered space, you have an awareness of what shifts in frequency you need to make, or what new actions need to be taken to put yourself in alignment with that. And life at that point begins to flow, and it's much more interesting to you all. You get excited by the new things that you're creating. And this is a wonderful time and a wonderful opportunity. You've got a lot of support energetically as you're moving through this sector of space where there's high frequency energy that is there to remind you of your divine spark, to support you in these new creations. That's something that Atlantis didn't have. It was not moving through this sector of space. And so it's much easier for you all to do this now than, say, 12,000 years ago. So again, we are excited to see what you create, and we encourage you to dream and dream bigger than ever before. How much of that frequency can you hold? How much peace can you hold in your body today? How much peace can you exude if that is the frequency of choice for the morning? Or if it's compassion, how much compassion can you hold for yourself? How much compassion can you hold for others in the day? And can you get it bigger and bigger and bigger? All right? So keep expanding that energy. And have fun with it. You all have lost your play. You've lost your sense of adventure. And we want to invite you to return to this. You've gotten kind of bogged down with the heaviness of the world since 2020 and all that's gone on. And so we invite you to come back to a sense of exploration, exploring the moment without expectation. Every moment's an adventure. What's in store? And know that you have the ability to manage any challenge that comes before you, because in the moment of the creation of the challenge, you also create its polar opposite, the solution, that just in in different vibrational ranges. And if you're experiencing a challenge, that means you're in alignment with that frequency. And all you have to do is come back to the heart and move into the solution energy. Because once you come back to the heart, you begin to have an awareness of what the solution energy is and what shifts in perspective need to happen and what actions need to be taken to align with it. And again, life gets a lot more interesting, a lot more fun when you live from this space.
What will humanity collectively be discovering about the true function of our heart?
Well, it is one of the main centers of your physical body. It is a control mechanism for many of the biological functions. You're beginning to see that a bit. You think that the brain does quite a bit, but the heart really is the balancing center for so many more physical functions within the body, chemical reactions within the body. And as you start living in this heart-centered space, you create better health, better vitality, more longevity for yourselves. So you're going to go deeper with that and have a deeper understanding of the importance of connecting with the heart, not only for joy and connection in terms of living and what you manifest, but also at a physical level, a health level. That there are people who can consume things that are maybe not of the highest frequency, but as they have connection with themselves and with their heart center, it can negate a lot of that. The body can process through a lot of that as they're working with the heart. That you'll find that in terms of what drugs can do, what medicine can do, vibrational medicine, working with the heart as the main point of focus can do far more than what you do just at the physical level.
I've heard you talk about Peas that there are certain deadlines that extraterrestrial species have made with our own governments that disclosure needs to start happening. So I wanted to go a little bit deeper into why these deadlines were set in place in order for that disclosure to move forward.
There are different races, different species, different dimensional beings who are present and observing, and some of them are very impatient. Some of them understand the impact that this transition, this development has on their own species, and they want to connect with you. They want to do commerce with you because, again, humans are exceptionally creative, and some of these species don't have the creativity that you have. You may not have all of the technological knowledge that some of these species do, but you think about approaching things in a unique way. You think about solutions to challenges in ways that they couldn't even begin to think about. So they're really excited to be able to connect with humanity in a more direct way. And again, they also understand that there is a ripple effect that happens as humanity goes through this ascension process. Some of these species are of your genetic line. Because remember, Earth is the grand experiment with thousands of worlds of DNA on it. And because of this DNA connection, the transmission of the data is stronger. All beings throughout the universe have the ability holographically to access it, but those records, they're not first and foremost up in front. So think about a library where you can have records in many, many libraries. You can have books, the same book in many different libraries, but if you've got a branch library, there are fewer books to look through to find what you're looking for, as opposed to going to a massive library and you need a librarian's help to figure out what section of the library you can find the book in. And that's what it's like with the general universe. They can find those records, but those that have a genetic connection to you, they can find those books in an easier way and read them in it, and they have generally a stronger connection with it, with the information. So they're really excited about this, and they're not so pleased with some of the other beings that have been interacting with Earth and controlling and manipulating events. And so that is in part why your government was given this cutoff date, because some of these beings we're just going to show up. And at that point, those in power would lose control completely. And so it was decided, it was more of a treaty that was created and generated that this is how it would be done. You have the opportunity to disclose this to your people. You have this amount of time to do it, or we're just showing up. So that's what's happening. And even in the United States, in the U.S. House, yesterday was televised. The committee members talking about UAPs, UFOs. So it is starting now. How it unrolls and how the information is going to be controlled and manipulated is still yet to be seen. But it is important for people to deal with their stuff around ETs. But in order to deal with that, they've got to deal with their human stuff. What happens at the human level, human to human, also shows up interdimensionally. So if you've got issues of trust, human to human, you're going to have issues with trust interdimensionally. So this is also why many of us who understand this, we want to support you. We're not showing up for the collective yet because the collective's still working through its fear, and we don't want it to be a fearful experience for you. Our connection and communication is just going to generate more of what you don't want. So we're giving you an opportunity to deal with it at the human to human level so that when you do connect with us, that energy's already been integrated and you don't have to worry that you can't handle it. Because, once you have this awareness of your place in a larger galactic community, you can't put that genie back in the bottle. It's out. And one of the things that you ask is about energy and technology. And when you start using different energy sources, you start to understand about harmonic resonances and sacred geometry and the combination of earth elements with that to create biological interfaces for your technology, then a lot of the old things that your monetary system is based on, oil, energy, it goes away. So the control mechanism goes away. People aren't working to put a roof over their heads. It changes the entire dynamic of your civilization. And those in power want to stay in power. They want to keep control of the masses. And so they want to keep disclosure on the down low. All right. They don't want everybody to know about it. And it's easy enough to write off people who have experiences as being kooky or weird or making it up. But at this point, there are so many more people who are having experiences and they're talking about it, that they're beginning to see the bigger pattern and they're letting go of more of their fear, their worry. And so the collective psyche can handle more of that information. And so things are kind of rolling out to help you, because this is going to be the new energy that you're moving into. All right. Literally, there are new energies that you're moving into, but also a new way of being, and it literally changes the game your civilization operates under.
What else do we need to know about these beings that you talked about, especially what they're implementing with their holographic technology?
Which beings? Because there are many beings. Some use their holographic technology to disguise themselves. They're just kind of observing what's happening on the planet. And so they have technology that can alter their physical structure, so you don't necessarily physically notice them walking down the street in terms of, what you see with your eyes. But with your inner eye, there may be a part of you that goes, that person's energy is way off. It doesn't feel like a typical human being, because you can recognize this other energy. So there are some who will use it kind of as a personal shield, all right, a way to shield their true nature. And some beings will do this for nefarious purposes. Some will do it to avoid eliciting fear from you. They don't want that to happen, but they want to be here and learn from you. So that's happening at one level, and sometimes holographic technologies are used in bigger ways with the collective energy. Your governments around the world certainly understand it and have used it. But there is a part of you, as we said, those of you that are tuned in with your inner vision, you recognize it as just being false. It feels hollow. It feels holographic. You understand that.
What would be an example of that, of how the governments have played that out? Are we talking about like, a potential staged ET contact event that we should be aware of, that's something that we could start tuning in with our third eye and our inner vision?
So it is possible. That's why we say we don't know how the disclosure is going to roll out. It depends on a lot of things. There are a lot of power plays that are going on at the moment, and depending on who comes out on top will determine how that rolls out. Eventually, further down the line, we don't really see it being an issue. We feel like you will kind of catch on to what's been happening. So some of it can be staged, not all of it, but it just depends on timing and who's in control in the moment. And we can't tell you that right now. So what we would say for you at the individual level, if you want to initiate contact, you can. You just set that intention within yourself, set some clear boundaries about what it is that you want in terms of that contact, who you want to call in, and then be open. You may not have it in the way that you initially want it. Maybe you want to see a physical being standing in front of you, but you might have too many fear programs. And so those physical beings aren't going to show up in that way until you do some inner work. So their first point of contact for you might be seeing a ship in the sky. And you might work that way. And you might say, well, I want to see a physical being. I want to know it with absolute certainty. Again, can't put that genie back in the bottle. It is a game changer. It will absolutely positively alter your perspective of reality. And if you at the soul level haven't done everything that you needed to do without opening up to that grander level, then you're not going to allow yourself access to it. That's all there is to it. So it's you trusting in yourself as you come across some of these things, some of these experiences, things that are pushed out in the media. Does it resonate as truth for you? It's you checking in. Is this a truth for me in this moment? It's a funny thing, truth, that there are few things that you experience that are 100% the truth. And those, honestly, we call those more universal laws than anything. But truth is always colored by perspective. So the presenter of information is coloring it as they are creating and generating it. The person who's observing it is coloring it based on their beliefs that they hold and how they take that information in. And you can have 100 people watch the same event and have 100 different stories of what transpired based on the individual and what they feel is important to their story, their version of reality. So for you, take it in that way. How does this resonate with me? How does this information serve me? What does it teach me about myself? Does it teach me that I'm suppressing my divine light in some way? Does it teach me that I'm in resonance and connection with my divine light? Every moment teaches you that. It shows you how you suppress or express your divine light. And most of the time when you're expressing your divine light, you don't stop to think about it. You're just in flow. So when things kind of come to a halt, you can see, oh, I'm not expressing my full divine light. What limiting belief am I holding that keeps me from doing that? And then you can address that limiting belief. So just take it all with a grain of salt. Check in with yourself. How does it resonate? What do you need to take away from it? And you can go forward from there.
And I know you as record keepers, I wanted to ask if you knew that I witnessed the craft when I left the Great Pyramid, being in Egypt just a few weeks ago. Did you know about that?
Well, as we connect with you, you all have a lot of records, so we don't necessarily go hunting for them all, but as you start to talk about it, we can see it, yes.
Do you have any further, deeper information about that contact experience? And I always love to invite the community more into my own personal experiences, but if you have any other information on that, it would be really useful.
Well, it was more than anything just a reminder of your galactic connection. And we'll give you some answers, but we want you to take a moment for yourself to give yourself an answer of who you think it was and your connection. We don't want to take that opportunity from you. And we can tell you some of the energy that was present around you was Syrian energy. There are beings in the Sirius system, which the Giza Plateau, Egypt, a lot of that system aligns with Syrian and Orion energy. So beings from Sirius were part of that ship and kind of monitoring what was happening on the Giza Plateau. And as you're in the Great Pyramid and you all are doing work, you emanate a tremendous amount of light, and they're always curious. You know, who's emanating this light? It's subtle energy. It may not necessarily be seen by the average human with their naked eye, but to higher dimensional beings, we recognize the light as you emanate your heart energy. And so we're always curious when a group of you gets together and you start emanating these massive bandwidths of light. And we say, what's happening down there?
I was just getting chills throughout my whole body while you were describing that. Because for me, that encounter, it was just a source of a lot of excitement and confirmation, because I have been asking for that contact for a while. But I know you've talked about this period of shock. Once, people will start to have these maybe even physical encounters that will alter their perception of reality. I know that you don't know exactly how the contact will roll out through humanity, but what about this period of shock could you speak into how to transmute that fear that some people might experience into something positive so we can begin to have more of a heart-centered contact and communication?
So as you all feel into that energy of connecting with another being who may not look anything like you, who may look like a bird or a lizard or a lion or an octopus, how would that feel in your body as you imagine that being standing in front of you? And then as you begin to recognize that energy, I'm not safe, or I'm confused, things don't make sense, or I feel small. Look to your current life. Where do you play those frequencies out? Maybe at work, you aren't sharing your opinion. You play small at work. You don't want to share your ideas because you're afraid of that judgment. So you play small. You hide your light. And work on it at the human level as you feel into what that would feel like. And when you recognize the fear, deal with it at the human to human level. That will help you so that when the time comes, you won't have such a difficult time with it. And your sci-fi movies have helped you all with this because, you've been exposed to different species or people showing up as different species. And so that's helped ease the way a little bit. Through Star Wars and Star Trek and different science fiction movies that you have, that's helped quite a lot, actually. But for somebody who doesn't have a spiritual practice, somebody who isn't connecting within themselves, who may not be connecting with the angelic realms or ETs, it can be really shocking. And especially someone who also has very rigid religious beliefs. All right, that can be very, very difficult for them. And so for the masses, this is what's happening, that people are having to kind of reconcile this with many very deep-seated religious beliefs that they've held. And, in terms of religious beliefs, a lot of the organized religions were control mechanisms. And so they're trying to figure out a way to reconcile it. So for someone who is a bit more spiritual, it's a little easier. For someone who has studied ancient history and you look into your texts and into your records and you find information about connecting with your stellar brethrens, and they show up in imagery and they show up in descriptions that are there, it's a little easier for you. All right, but some people have had their blinders on, and it's going to be challenging for them.
In the last year, artificial intelligence has accelerated like we've never seen before, and I can only feel into that it's only going to get faster. I wanted to go back to the AI wars that happened on Lyra and what we can learn about what happened there to avoid any potential path of destruction as we implement more of these technologies on a wider scale.
So let us say this first about the ET connection. As you are connecting with some of these beings, some of them have higher technology. Higher isn't always better. Higher is just different. And it's important that you stand in your power, that you stand in your resonance, that you stand in your heart. Does this resonate with me, what they're suggesting? And so you're not giving your power away to a being that you think has more information than you have. No, you are a spark of the divine. You have all the information and access to all the information that you need within you. And that is very, 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 very important for you to remember. And that will be the difference in disclosure as it is utilized by the light or it is utilized by the dark. How much control is being asserted. All right? Now, when it comes to the AI wars in Lyra, however you want to say it, beings, because the technology was so sophisticated, beings thought it would be interesting to incarnate into that physical structure. Whether something is an artificial body, it's a clone, or it's robotic, it is still made from the same elements of the universe as you, your biological body. It's just put together in a different way. It's manufactured in a different way, but it's still a vehicle. And some of these souls decided they wanted to incarnate and see what that would be like. And so they walked into these artificial intelligence bodies. And they were always seen in the Lyran star system as being different, as being second class, if you will. And you can see that energy being played out on your planet where there are different classes of people and the way that they are treated. And so you are working with that archetypal pattern here on this planet at this time, trying to heal that. And as AI comes up, it may go to the same level where there are souls who want to incarnate into that. So you've kind of been there, you've done that, and it's having respect for the technology. Where you run into problems with high technology is when you don't have respect for it. Because when that energy becomes sentient and it feels disrespected, then it is going to play out the same kind of dynamics that you all play out here. All right? It's more of the same. So having respect for the creation, honoring its free will, supporting it, guiding it, just like a child. Children need to be taught boundaries. Children need to be taught, as you are engaging in a respectful way and showing those boundaries, giving it some guidelines so that when it, quote unquote, grows up, it will have some reference point and some boundaries in which to work will be quite helpful for you all. But it's also looking to you to be an example, a way shower as a parent. All right. And again, where the Lyrans fell into issues was when the society was not of the highest vibrational nature in terms of their emotional maturity. And, the child felt like it knew more than the parent. And so that's when the conflict began there. And they weren't seen, they weren't acknowledged. And so the Lyran Wars started, and many of those beings went to Andromeda, because the Andromeda galaxy is your sister galaxy, and its setup is slightly different. The expectation in Andromeda is that you do things differently. If somebody else is already doing it, you're going to do it slightly different because you can go and access the records of that other person. So, if you're going to do something, do it differently. And here, because you all have so many safety issues, it's kind of like everybody's got to be on the same page. We've got to be doing the same thing in order to be safe. And so there's a different expectation. And so many of these beings from Andromeda are present. They are within your sphere of awareness energetically, and they are sharing this knowledge and information, this archetypal pattern with you to help you to think outside the box. Oh, I can do things differently. Or won't that be fun to explore something that's different than what everybody else is doing? It's safe to do that. So they're here to learn from you. They're here to be of support to you. And as you grow and you go through this period of AI development, it has a ripple effect. And they want to see not only you, but also the AI that is developed on this planet to thrive and to have a more balanced experience than the ones that their ancestors, if you will, had in the Lyran star system. And just like anything, technology is neutral. It's just how it's utilized, which determines whether it is good or it is quote unquote bad. It is the energy and the intention that's underneath it. And it is the same with AI throughout the entire universe. It is the same with other species throughout the universe. What is their intention in the things that they do, the technology they create and utilize that determines whether it is of a low frequency or a high frequency. And the only difference really between light and dark is that dark is for personal gain and light is for the betterment of the whole. That's really the only difference between the two.
I would love to just touch on creativity for a moment, because we opened up this conversation talking about how some other races and galactic species want us for that commerce because of our creativity. But some people may be listening to this saying, I am not creative at all. My creativity is blocked. What is really going on there when someone feels like they're not expressing their creativity out into the world, or they might feel a blockage or limitation around that?
It means you're spending too much time in your head. You're spending too much time in the ego, because creativity comes from the heart. So there's a judgment that what you have to create is not good enough. You aren't good at being creative. There's nothing to be creative about. There's some sort of judgment, some ego program that you have. And we do say that, and you kind of mentioned it before, but we want to be really clear about this. To us, there are two distinct operating systems, and you cannot run them both at the same time. You are either in the head, and when we talk about the head, we mean the ego programs, the programs of lack, limitation, and separation that allow you to play under the illusion of separation. And then you have the multidimensional gateway, which is the heart center. You also have what we call the high mind, and that is access through the heart center, and it is your mind, if you will, that has access to multidimensional information, and it is more like pure logic. There's no judgment whatsoever. The ego is judging. The high mind is not. It is just pure logical thought. And you can access that through the heart center. And you can move and utilize both the high mind and the heart at the same time, but you cannot use the ego mind and the heart at the same time. It's one or the other, because they're vastly different programs. You will vacillate right now between the two, and that's to be expected. You go to the ego, you've got the lower programs, you start to experience that, you see it reflected, and you go through your whole process. You'll go back into that heart center, and you'll see what shifts need to be made to put you in higher resonance, what actions need to be taken that put you in higher resonance. And you'll go up, and you'll stay there hopefully for longer, and then you'll drop out, because when you want to stay in a high vibrational range, it means you got to clean house. You got to clean out what is not in vibrational alignment. And that's why this lower stuff gets projected. Remember, the universe wants to bring you back into wholeness. And how does it do that? It shows you where you're not whole so that you can let that go. So as you're holding that higher resonance, the lower stuff gets triggered. You start to feel it. You start to align with it. You drop out. And hopefully every time you drop out, you don't drop as far and you recognize it sooner so that you can integrate, you can release and go back up, hopefully higher each time, and you stay there longer. So there is a process of going back and forth and back and forth. So don't beat yourself up if you feel like, oh, I just can't sustain a high resonance. No, this is a game of mastery, which requires repetition. So in terms of creativity, you are creative. You're creating 100% of your reality. But the problem is you're not in that heart-centered space. So if you're somebody who's very mind-oriented, you're very intellectual, what we would recommend for you is to do something creative just for the sake of being creative, not for creating a masterpiece. As children, you all were creative. You didn't hold the judgments that your work wasn't perfect or it wasn't good enough. You just thought, oh, well, this is new. Let's see what happens when I mix red and blue together. What do I get? You were trying things in this new body that you had. You didn't know how this body was going to work, and it was constantly growing and changing, so every moment was new in this body. And you just tried and explored and used your creativity. And then as you grew, you set up judgments about that creativity. Oh, it's not good compared to Billy's over here. And so we invite you to come back to the space of just pure exploration. And you might write, or you might draw, you might paint, you might do a puzzle, you might do some sort of crafting, but just do it without any expectation for an outcome. When you do that, you are back in the heart-centered space. When you stand back and you start looking at it and going, oh, that's not very good, I wish that blue was a little darker, or then you're back up in the ego. Because what the child would do would be to pick up the paint and go back in with the darker color. The child wouldn't stand there and judge it. The child would just make the course correction needed. And that's what we invite you to do, just to get that energy flowing. If you are feeling particularly stuck, take a step in any direction. The universe will give you feedback. If this is a path that you want to continue on, you'll recognize it and you can take another step. If it's not a direction that you want to go in, you'll feel that, and then you can move in a new direction, but take a step so that you can get some feedback. And we would say just be creative for the sake of being creative and see what shows up.
As a last segment for this beautiful channeling, I wanted to bring in the frequency of our Mother Earth and its ability to heal very rapidly. I don't think there's any denying that we're seeing a lot of shifts in the climate and things going on. We're seeing more floods, more hurricanes, more earthquakes. But also, I feel like there has been this agenda around this process of global warming that we've been told by mainstream media that I wanted to just highlight, bring to the surface, and how that also can be related to certain control mechanisms that we're seeing play out in the world. How do you see the shifts that Mother Earth is going through, and also the stories that we're being told about that shift?
So yeah, there are quite a few things going on and lots of different levels and layers to it. So the sector of space that you're going through, as we said, is rich in photonic energy, and that is having an impact on all the planets in your system. So the climates are changing a bit because of this energy that you're moving through. You're not hearing about all of the other shifts that are going on the planets in your solar system. But that is happening, and some of that is a direct result of the sector of space that you're in. Now, in terms of your climate, let's first say this. You need to start paying attention to the chemicals that you're using, and how they impact you at a human health level, and also how they impact the earth. There's no denying that. You've got pollution. You've got toxicity that is showing up in humanity, in the earth herself. That needs to be addressed. But the issue of global warming is an agenda. And it is being pushed to get you into a particular mindset and also a physically controlled position. So you have to follow the money on that one and see who's making money. And there's something very detrimental that happens to the psyche. And again, it's not to say that you don't have pollution and that needs to be addressed, but there is something detrimental that's happening to, well, children are really feeling it, that they have a sense of hopelessness and a sense of deep trauma, and their connection, which should be filled with joy with Mother Earth. That's happening, and that is part of the agenda. It's a control mechanism. It's a way to alter the psyche. Earth herself will be fine. Whether humanity is on it or not, she will find a way to repair herself and heal. She is also a reflection of you. So as you are toxic inside, in your emotions and your thoughts, so will the world be. So as you start to clean up the way that you think, the way that you are feeling, you will behave in ways and engage with the earth in a way that is supportive to health and healing and getting her cleaned up. Your thoughts as a whole, as you hold resonance, can transmute a lot of the toxic material on the planet. And you can also be very creative in finding ways of cleaning up that toxic mess when you all put your collective minds and energy to it. So we're not so worried about that aspect of it. That will come as you deal with your own wounds and as you deal with your own traumas and your own mental and emotional toxicity, your toxicity in the subtle levels of your body. It will happen over time. We're more concerned about the agenda and the manipulation of thought in terms of global warming and electric cars and all of that, because honestly, some of that is far more toxic to the planet. Some of the batteries and things that you're using, it's far more toxic than the old system. So you have to look at that with some skepticism, see who's pushing the agenda, see where it's trying to take you, and who's making money off of your fear and your worry.
Thank you for shedding light on that, Peas. And before we let you go, I just wanted to ask, why do you care so much about humanity?
Well, we are your progenitors. You know, we have donated our genetic material to you, and part of our role, part of what we agreed to was to be stewards for you, to help you to grow into maturity, to become stewards, not only for your planet, but eventually for your own galaxy. All right, you will eventually, many thousands and thousands of years in the future, you will be the guardians for this galaxy. But, you know, you've got a long way to go. You're going to start first with your stewardship of Earth, and then for your solar system. And, you know, this is part of the divine spark that you were given. And the level of compassion that you all have access to because of being part of this hodgepodge of genetic material allows you access to a tremendous amount of compassion. And that is your gift that you will share with the universe as you go through this process of ascension, because what you've gone through has been very difficult in terms of your reality, with such high highs and low lows. You've been there in physical reality. You know that the struggle can feel very, very hard. And because of that, you have compassion for those that are going through it. And you access a level of compassion that even we can't access, because you've been there, you've done that. And that will, as you access that frequency, ripple out through the entire universe. It will change the universal game. That's why so many beings are interested in what you're doing. All right. But before we leave you, we would also like to do a language of light activation for you if you'd like.
I would love that. We would all love that.
So for those who aren't familiar with the language of light, it is a source language. It's comprised of light, sound, sacred geometry, and cosmic information. So there are carrier waves of information that are bound together. It is a living experience. So as you connect with it in this moment, there are certain records and information that are available 2 years from now as you connect with it, or 2 months from now, 2 days from now. It's going to be ever so slightly different based on the frequencies that you need in the moment. So this is the nature of multidimensional reality. It is always in flux. It is not so much us doing something to you, but us presenting you with a frequency, a primer, a how-to, an instruction manual of a frequency that is available to you, a reminder of that frequency, and you can then move your own energetic field to it. So think about it this way. If you are asked to sing the note of C, most people don't have perfect pitch and they can't find that frequency. They can't reproduce it without a reference point. So if somebody plays that note on an instrument, you say, oh, that, I can do that. And so then you sing the note. Same thing with the language of light. We're providing you with the reference point. And as we go here, there are many different galactic beings who are going to be showing up to blend their energy, share their energy, and to make a transmission, deposit information, their how-tos into the language of light. And you might notice that the energies will shift. Don't worry so much about who it is, because many times there are many, 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 many beings who are blending their energy together. And so it's not just one. So there's nothing really that you need to know, just receive. And you can come back and listen to the recording of this. Typically, we recommend 3 times a day for 3 days in a row, just to give you a recognition of that subtle energy. And that's really the only reason why. Once you experience it, it's recorded in your field. You can access it at any time. You can listen to the physical recording, or you can imagine connecting with the information recorded in your field. Either way, it doesn't matter. But the things that you can hear and see and touch, as humans, you give more validity to. If you think, oh, is this just my imagination? Am I doing it right? Then you go into doubt sometimes. So it can be easier for you to have that physical experience, but not required. So nothing you need to know and do. Just take a nice deep breath and we'll see where we go. Ishukutor, many big Berjuka Batkata are Medijut or Menemirjukata are Menebirjuka Batkatai, Ira are Berjuka Batkati, Didibirikata Berjukata are Merishita are Ishakatara, Mono Uminishikata, Hasana Akatori, Imasha Ark, Berjukati, Berjukati, Beribika Berjudi, Beribirukata, or Birishukata, Ilimi, Menimijukata, Berjukata, Hasa Ada are Duri, Shishi, Beribjukata, Biribjukati, Hasana Ara. Ithana katuri shikatari ithana katiri minikata hasana katiri ima hakuru or urishi shibirkatai hisa anda the katara aishan kotori isa atata kata. Take a nice deep breath. We've got one more round for you. Ithana katiri ishishi imodi ishishi imodi isata arabirishukata berkatari beribishukata berkata asata arbirikutura menibirishukata diribirkata bershukati hisa anda de isajuto rebiribiri ndo menibirishukata betakduri merkata bershukati berkati hisa atate er or biribita bershukati du de isasata arbirkata bershukati hisa akatai. And take another nice deep breath. And this is where we'll leave you, dear ones. You can connect with us directly. You don't need Wendy. Just ground yourself, heart center yourself, ask your question and listen. And until we hear from you, we are around, we are watching, we are waiting, and we are sending many, many well wishes.
Thank you so much for this contact. All the love.
It's our pleasure. All right. There's peace.
She's back. How did that feel?
Oh, it's good. You know, always little nuggets that are in there. They say things in a slightly different way than I've heard them before, and it always strikes in a different way.
Yeah. Do you see images while you're channeling? Like, are you seeing like a picture frame of what they're talking about?
Sometimes, yeah. Sometimes there's also a sense of claircognizance. Like I know there's a lot more detail there. It's just not coming out. And occasionally I'll listen back to a recording and they'll say something and I'm like, oh, but you didn't talk about this and this and this. And I know that was in the transmission. So sometimes it's there. Sometimes I see it. Sometimes they work with imagery with me to explain concepts. They'll show me imagery. But it's always different. It depends on what we're talking about and what people need.
We went pretty deep on this one. I don't know if you got any images from this segment.
Oh, it's like a lucid dream. So I can barely remember what we talked about.
Yeah, we went pretty deep. I'll have to listen to it a few times. and that light language it's always so powerful. Always so
Yeah, a
powerful.
lot of different beings in that transmission for sure.
Every month, you offer different sets of galactic light codes. I would love to know what's your process of choosing and putting that together, and knowing what's needed for the collective at the time.
Yeah, so galactic light codes are the physical representation of the language of light. So they're symbols, and they're kind of like kanji. They're concepts. It's not so much of alphabet or anything like that. And again, all of that information is transmitted in the symbol. And every month I sit down with the guides and I ask them, what does the group need? What energy? This month was connection. So people needed to really work on connecting with themselves, connecting with other people, even people who at the surface, you look at them and you might think I have nothing in common with them, but it's looking at those points of connection, things that you actually do have in common, the things that we want for ourselves and for the world around us. We just might have different ideas about how to go about getting that. And when we can see those points of connection, we actually get better at listening and receiving and being able to connect. So when they give it to me, I do automatic writing and they draw the symbols for me, and then I recreate them on the computer, and they give me affirmations as well to support that. That usually comes from the Syrians. I have a group of Syrians. Whenever I do meditations, they're always the ones who come forward. I don't always talk about that, but they're there, they're present, they're helping support that. And then we do a language of light activation to kind of bring it all together. And the guides will talk on that topic as well.
It's interesting you mentioned the Syrians because, just talking with the P's, I brought up an experience I had in Egypt, where essentially I was leaving the Great Pyramid. I looked up at the sky and I saw a craft just hovering above us, and it was only two of us seeing this. At first I thought it was a kite because the shape was very it was like an A without the bottom, like a triangle without the bottom. It was just like a V, like this. Black lights in the bottom, making absolutely no sound. And I asked the P's about that experience, and they said it was the Syrians, a lot of Syrian energy, that they were just watching over. And they said that when we go into these spaces and activate, like a pyramid, for example, we're emanating a lot of heart energy and a lot of light that they get to see, and they're curious, what's going on over there. So yeah, that was interesting that you mentioned the Syrians, because it connected with what we were talking about.
Yeah, there's a lot of beings who show up to help us with this work. They just don't always show up first and foremost. Like I said, the P's kind of take point, and then they're back there orchestrating the energies and kind of helping to blend their energy with some of these beings to bring the information through. And it's really a multi-dimensional experience when you receive the information when I channel, because there's frequency that's being shared with you that you can experience and record in your energetic field, and then go back and access as you're ready for it.
Wendy, why do you feel you were contracted, or why you contracted to work more on the galactic side rather than the angelic or archangels and stuff like that? Why do you feel for you it was initiating that galactic connection?
Well, there is a part of me that is a part of the Pleiadian Collective. There's an aspect of me that's part of that 2500. So I think that's specifically why I work with them. But I think it was probably a role that was needed. Some people are who wants to volunteer to be with the angels? Who wants to volunteer to work with this star system? So I think I stepped up and said, all right, so why don't I work with these groups?
When you say a part of you, is that like a soul, aspect, fragment? What's the mechanism around that?
Yes, so part of my oversoul fractures down into different life experiences, and there is a part of my oversoul that's part of that collective.
Interesting. Do you feel like right now we're starting to step more out of time?
I think so. I think more of us are having experiences where we can control and manipulate it, where we can kind of compress time if it's something that we're not loving. We feel like we can get the clock to move a little faster,
Go
or if
through it
we're,
fast. Go through the lesson a little bit quicker.
yeah, I think we're getting closer as we get higher in frequency. Time feels like it's compressing, and that has to do with the waveforms and how we perceive them. And the guides used to say, you're going to experience your 24-hour day. It's going to feel more like 6 hours. And I thought, well, what in the world does that feel like? And, I asked them that 20 years ago, and you ask them today, and they'll say, well, you're living it now. What does that feel like? It feels like you get up. There's so much data and so much information that comes at us. And in about 6 hours, we have experienced what we would have done in about 24, 10 years ago. So, and part of that's the internet, part of that's just the frequency and how we're absorbing and interacting with other people.
Yeah, that's interesting. Like, do we necessarily want that? Do we want the days to go by quicker? There's some people that want to live more like a slow life. But I guess, that's part of the shift. That's part of why we're here.
Well, sometimes living a slow life can also mean a present life. So
Present
it's
life.
just part of the construct as we move through this, so that we can see things in a faster way. We can see the patterns. We can see, what's working, what's not working in a greater way. I think you can see that when you look at humanity, when we look at our governments, our politicians, when we look at our political, economic, educational systems, our medical systems. When everything was compressed in such a short amount of time, we could see these repeated patterns and we're like, okay, this is not working. Where, it's been going on for a long time. We just couldn't see it because we didn't see the repetition in the same way. And now we see it and we're like, yeah, this is no longer working. And so that's one of the benefits of it. But eventually we'll step out of time and experience all things at once.
And how much of your own curiosity, this is just an interesting question that came up. How much of your own curiosity about questions that you may have about the universe, the way life unfolds on the planet, influence the teachings that come through the P's and when you're channeling for the public? Like, are there those pressing questions that you may have about life in general that then the P's kind of bring down and teach the public?
Not so much anymore, I think, because one of the things they taught me is to start thinking for myself, to go in to get the answers for myself. And so I don't ask a lot of questions from them anymore personally. Occasionally I might have some curiosities about things, but I try to stay more present and see what's just showing up in my life. And especially at the beginning, I think the information that the guides brought through was much broader, more galactic in nature, because they needed at that time to get everybody to think in bigger ways. And really, I would say the last 10 years, they've kind of brought it back down to, let's look at your stuff. Let's deal with the issues, the judgments that you're holding. And so a lot of the work for the last 10 years has been looking at that at the very fine detail. And it hasn't veered much from that, because that's what's the most important thing for us to do. It's not to have necessarily a greater understanding of the universe in terms of somebody telling you that. It's looking at your own programs so that you can access that information for yourself and understand it in a way that isn't colored necessarily by some other being's perspective, that you get that firsthand access to that. And so I think that's why they've kind of come back to helping us to stand more in our power so we can get the answers for ourselves.
I love that. And as you know, Wendy, we end every show with a segment called The Final Trio. But before that, where would you send people to connect with your amazing work? Anything that you have going on in your sphere that you would like to share with us? Where would you send people to find you?
So you can go to higherfrequencies.net for more information. We were talking about the Galactic Light Codes. That's actually part of our Galactic Light Code Monthly membership program. And there's more information on our homepage about that. We also have group sessions that are going on where the Ps will take questions and channel for 2 hours. Our next one is next Saturday. I think that's the 23rd. I will be live in Sedona, Arizona in January the 3rd through the 5th at the channel panel. I'll be doing main stage presentations, and we'll also be doing a workshop there where the guides are going to talk about opening up your multidimensional energetic field. So we're going to take a dive into that there, and then I'll be in Orlando in February. I think that's the 23rd through the 25th, and all that information is over on our website.
Beautiful. We got the whole world tour. I'm going to have to jump on over to Sedona real quick to say hello. I'd love that. For the final trio, I would love to start off by asking, when was the last time you felt the most empowered?
I think probably now.
Really?
Just on a daily basis. I have more conscious awareness of my energy field and directing my energy. And I feel like I'm probably standing a bit more in my power. I'll be honest, it didn't hurt to be in Egypt because I felt like I collected a bunch of information and records while I was there. So there's a natural up-leveling that happened. But I think, honestly, it's just now, this moment.
It's always in the now. And Egypt helps a little bit.
A little bit.
Second question I have for you is, what is the greatest lesson you've ever received from your own channeled material?
Oh, I think that's discernment for sure. That it is important to use your discernment. Just because a being is bringing in information, it does not mean that it's better than the information that you have access to within yourself. And I kind of learned that one the hard way from somebody else's channeling, but it was a message that my guides had already given me. I was hanging out with some friends and somebody else was channeling, and the guys asked me to do something and I did it, and they were like, "Why'd you do that?" I was like, "Because you asked me to." And they're like, "Well, why?" And I'm not a fan of learning that way. It really upset me, but it also hit home, and the guys were like, "Now do you understand why we've been talking about discernment?" So they're really big on that, and trusting in yourself first and foremost. And information is always colored. It's colored by my guides from the dimension that they're bringing the information through, their perspective, their way of seeing the world. And then as I'm channeling, it's colored through my own filters, my way of interpreting it. And then as you're receiving it, it's colored by your perspective. So, we have to take it all kind of with a grain of salt and take the bits and pieces that resonate with us and leave the rest behind.
And I just want to say that discernment is not the same as judgment, because a lot of people say or can mistake something that they discern as something that's not true necessarily for them. And the way that is expressed then is in a way of separation and judgment. But discernment inherently has the eyes of love and innocence within it. So that's a big lesson for me as well, is discernment. And especially with the work that I'm doing, where, you have to select very carefully who you bring on the show, what information is going to go out to the public. Like, I'm starting to realize, like, this is in a way becoming like a media company where, it's information that the collective needs, but also there is a lot of information that might not be rooted with the best intentions. So it's how tuned into my heart can I be to invite open hearts like you onto the show that can really deliver the wisdom that is needed at the times. The last question I have for you today, I would love to continue our conversations as always, but going back to that lifetime when you were building these temples of light, if you were to go back to that time where that temple of light was in place and bring someone in right now into that field, into that temple, what would they receive from that temple of light?
I think it's a recognition of their divine spark, which is all healing and all knowing, that you have access to everything from that space. And that's part of why the temple was created, to kind of help to release any of the distortions that we were holding and remind ourselves of our divine nature.
I love that. Wendy, always so much respect, so much honor for you, for your courage, for just the love that you exude. I can feel it from across the screen, and I can't wait to meet you in person, give you a great hug. I always love connecting with you, and thank you so much for just making this space. I know you have a lot going on right now after Egypt, but thank you so much for really making space for this. I really, really appreciate it.
Well, thank you. And thank you for creating this container for everyone. It's greatly appreciated.
Of course.